listening to Fight Stories.
Hey everyone, you're listening to another episode of Fight Stories. This is your host Tyler Morrison with the other host John Moses.
Yeah, we're here in Jersey at the Shared Universe Studios, and it looks awesome in here. So we're grateful for you guys for having us.
And we're going to be doing another killer episode of the podcast. We have a great guest on the line here. It's none other than former NHL enforcer, Mr. Darin Kimble, everyone. Darin, how are you doing today, buddy?
Good, gentlemen. How are you guys doing today?
Very good. Gentlemen's a big assumption.
Yeah, so you're just out in St. Louis right now? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I've been living just on the other side of St. Louis in Granite City, Illinois, is where my family lives at. So back in the day when I played there, I met my wife, and we were. I continued on playing hockey in other places, but that's where her home is. So she's a school teacher here for 25 years now, and so when my hockey career was done, this is where we laid our house down, and this is where we live now.
Oh man, that's sweet. You don't think of it's like an NHL guy that would sort of be like, oh, we have to commit to my wife's teaching career and the community built around that. That's a nice story. It's a nice gesture.
My wife's a teacher, but I'm a comedian, so I have to commit to my wife's teaching career.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, right.
Very nice. So yeah, man. Basically, we just like to talk to people about their lives and career, and hear as many cool fight stories as we can. That's it's pretty simple.
Yeah. We talk to a lot of different people in different walks of life. We get some UFC guys, we get some boxers. We love hockey fighters, and then we get a bunch of just like average Joes. But Tyler is a particular fan of hockey fighters, and actually did years before we've even come together to do this podcast, he used to put together these great tribute reels, and he was showing me them, and he did one about you, and it was just fucking bombs away.
Yeah, I kind of introduced.
Yeah, stand back. You know what though, Tyler? If you keep doing about fighting, you're gonna have a short career because they're chasing that out of the game now, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I know they really have softened things up, and thank God there's YouTube, eh? We can relive the glory days.
I know. It's amazing how many people watch hockeyfights.com.
Yeah, it's huge.
You know what? It's people always. Now I'm in St. Louis, so we had Ryan Reeves in St. Louis here, and I was a big fan of Ryan, and he was a player that could play in all the time, and people are saying how he's the toughest guy, and I agree with them that he's the toughest guy in the league right now. But
who's he fighting?
I also go to people. I said, do you understand what you have to what we had to go through back in the day? The guys that we had to battle every day. Like there was a Ryan Reeves on every team, and if not one, may there be two or three. So I said he's got it pretty easy right now. Oh
yeah, like he's the champion in a league where there's no one to fight.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's wild. The era that you came up in, I always consider it the golden age of hockey fighting, where teams, like you said, were about 3 enforcers deep, and you get it was like hockey fight Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little quick story. When my first exhibition game was against the Philadelphia Flyers back in the day, and so I'm on the ice, and now I was the only guy that was fighting in the lineup at that time for the Quebec Nordiques, and so we're playing the game. And a scrum happens. I look up. I got Dave Brown, Craig Berube. I don't know if you guys know Dale Kushner or not, but Dale Kushner was a tough guy back in the Western Hockey League.
Oh, yeah.
I got 3 of them sitting there looking at me, and Dave Brown goes in his voice, that little squeaky little voice that he's got. He goes in there, which one of us do you want? So, my answer, because I'm a young rookie and didn't know anything, I go, I'll take any one of you effers on, and away we went. But that was the day. So it was kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you came out of that really tough Western Hockey League, which is just stacked with tough kids coming up and trying to make their bones into the NHL. What was it like, being a teenager, having to fight teenage Tony Twist?
But it was probably a good thing fighting him as a teenager because the Twister got farther along in his career.
Yeah,
he got a lot. He got bigger. He got stronger. Punches probably got harder. And I did fight him in the NHL also. But
oh yeah.
It's kind of funny when when I do a podcast in St. Louis with Jamie Rivers, and he talks about it, and Rivers goes, Darin Kimble, the only guy that's fought Tony Twist 8 times, and I sort of chuckle about that.
Oh, wow.
And like if anyone who's listening, if you don't know who Tony Twist is, you might want to go on YouTube and check some of the Twisters fights out. It was Brett Hull, I think, said they could just put a cardboard cutout of Tony Twist on the bench and the other team would be scared.
Yeah, he was like, you know, you go besides. I'll always say Probert was the best at it, and that's my own opinion. And I think that's a lot of opinions by a lot of people. But Twister was right up there. He was, but Twister was he took his job to you know, it was different than Probert was. Probert was playing the game a lot, and Twister understood his role as a lot of other guys had roles, but it was just he was sort of into it pretty hard.
Yeah, and when you came up into the NHL, it was like you said, there was a lot of guys gunning for jobs, and you came up in Quebec, and you said you're the only guy fighting on that team at the time. Like there wasn't, I mean, there'd be other fights, but you're the only pure, you know, main fighter there. Is that what it was like?
Yeah, we had, and when I was in Quebec, and so Joe Sakic gets drafted. We had Matt Sundin there, Curtis Lecision. We had a young team, and Brian Fogarty was there at the time, but a lot of young guys. And when I went to camp my first year, I fought Gord Donnelly, and
was tough.
Gordo, we had a fight, and I did really well against Gord, and then I got sent down to the minors, and then they traded Gord. And when I come up, like I was really the only guy there at the time. There was no one there to get any help in Quebec, and I was sort of a downfall of the part playing in Quebec because like Greg Smith got called up at one point in time, and when Bird Dog was up there with us, you know, we had a couple guys we could run around with, and it gives you more confidence because you're not having to fight everybody, so,
right?
Or at least you have someone that you can talk to about it that knows what you're going through too, like you guys, or you can like strategize to, you know, I'm going to take this guy, you take that guy type thing, for sure.
Correct.
And so you get into Quebec and you start, you know, really, you know, going in against some pretty big guns.
Here's a good question about playing in Quebec. Was it hard to score with chicks because of the language barrier?
No, that was the place there was Quebec City. I feel bad for him. I was just back there 2 years ago. My son was playing the Pee Wee Quebec tournament.
Okay,
and so I went back there and. I feel bad for them because the people loved hockey.
Really?
And the fans, you know, we were a last place team when I was there for 2 years, and people liked you. And you know, if you were in that department, it wasn't that hard to do that, but it was, you know, you were. People just loved the game of hockey. You were actually a god there, and even though you're last place.
I thought you were going to say that you felt bad for them for some of the stuff that you did.
No,
I feel bad for the people of Quebec based on my tenure,
especially Stacy. No, it really is true. I mean, like it was so nice to see the franchise go back to Winnipeg, and you thought like, is Quebec next?
Oh, it'd be
Hamilton.
So
it was always a town that could have totally, you know, supported an NHL franchise, but the Leafs would just never let it happen. You know, there are some towns in Canada where I'm like, God, they would love a franchise. Atlanta does not need a franchise.
Yeah, but it's not Disney on Ice that they want to see in those cities. So,
you know, you're sitting there talking like Seattle just got a team, but you're talking now. They're talking like possibly Houston getting a team in there. Like this Quebec team this Quebec City they'll support a team. Mm-hmm. I guess the media maybe just doesn't want to travel that way up there. It's too cold for them or something. I have no idea.
Well, if you look at that LNAH league, I mean, the fans in Quebec are still diehard hockey fans, and they like tough hockey there. And I mean, it's too bad. It really is a shame. So, you know, it's kind of like they've starved them.
Quebec, we love you.
We love you, Quebec.
Yeah, we should. It's a great place. It's a great place.
So when you go into Quebec and you start fighting, you're in this, like, basically it's once Probert comes along, it's almost like an arms race for teams to get tough guys, and you're going through the league, and all of a sudden, a guy named Troy Crowder comes along in his rookie year, and he starts dropping people. He pops Chikrin. He pops. I think Cox he fought that year maybe, but it got really rowdy, and he cut Probert, and that was the big rematch set, that Probert versus Crowder, and everyone was anticipating, and it's in the media. But who comes along? Darin Kimble spoils the parade. drops Troy Crowder right before the rematch. What a guy here.
Yeah, right before. Yeah, I know. I had to take away some of the box seats to get my name in the card. So I got, you know what though, I was going through a process, and you want to be honest, guys. So I'm playing in Quebec, and we'd gone through a bunch of coaches. The first couple coaches I had there, I really liked, and a guy named Dave Chambers come into the ball game, and I was sort of on my way out of Quebec. There was a little friction going on with the coach, and some shit had happened down the road, so this fight come along, and it probably got me out of Quebec. Thank God it did, because I was in a bad spot. So Crowder was sitting there with all this media attention on him, all the people that he had fought and done really well against. And
do you think he was looking through you?
Things just went well.
Do you think he was looking past you? Like he's like, oh, this is the date I got circled on the calendar.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, he could have been, but I don't think so, because when he was playing in that game, and just there's a guy on their team that was Kevin Todd, and Kevin Todd I played with in junior hockey, so Todd would have known all about me, and there would have been one of their coaches I had fought down in Utica in the minors, so he had seen me fight, so I know how word travels in the National Hockey League. So, and if you watch the fight, Crowder's throwing him as much as I'm throwing him.
He's going hard.
Eventually, he's throwing hard, and he's hitting me in the fight too. But all of a sudden, I land a good punch, and then I land another good punch, and so
you clipped him.
It went in my favor. But he was throwing pretty good too.
Yeah. It was a great fight. It was just a great showcase of you know what? It was a great showcase of your power, because you've been in a lot of your fights. They're rock'em sock'em robot fights. Like you're going 12 bells. Just it's a few Pier 6 jobs that you've been in, and but that one kind of let people know, hey, Darin can swing. Like Darin can hit. Yeah. Like that it buckled him. And then the LaForge fight, that was pretty serious. LaForge, he didn't kind of like have like a big reputation in the NHL, but he had a reputation in the minors coming up, because he got suspended for an entire year from the OHL. So there was that stigma around him, and he's such a big guy that there was a lot of anticipation about what he was going to do in the league, kind of like the way Crowder came in, and you crushed him too. Like, what was your take on that fight? What was it like going up against him?
I knew of LaForge just because I known what had gone on in the Ontario Hockey League, how he'd been suspended and all that. So, and back in the day, Quebec and Hartford, we were in the Adams division, so they were a rivalry of the Quebec Nordiques at the point in time. So, going in there, LaForge had just got called up. So obviously back in that day, you knew what was going to happen, and there wasn't no secret to anything. So when he come out on the ice, it was just away you go. And, I was ready for it. When you play another real tough guy, and especially when we were younger, you're trying to make a name for yourself. Yeah. You knew what the hell was going on. And that in that fight there, which would be, I really liked for myself, because it was a righty against a lefty. So, either he's knocking me down or I'm knocking him down. This is going one way or the other. And there's no grabbing, because I wasn't much of a guy to grab on. I didn't like that. And so LaForge is throwing his left, I'm throwing my right. And I'm probably a little, I probably throw a little quicker than he does in my punches, and I catch him over the eye. And that was all that rode to that. And
it was just a bloodbath. And do you feel that contributed to LaForge kind of never materializing in the NHL? Do you think that like contributed to that, because it was such a massive, impactful loss for him? Do you think that kind of maybe set him back a few steps? Well, we come out of the junior, and he had such a reputation. But I was watching on YouTube somewhere. They talk about these guys fighting down even lower than the East Coast League. I played in these leagues in the Whipple and all that, and they ran across LaForge when he was playing down there. And I think in an interview, in the interview he comes out and he mentions the fight, and he basically says that was that really rattled him, and he had a hard time coming back after that.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Like Ronda Rousey. No.
Exactly. You know what though? You look at things, and it happened to me a little later on in the ball game, because I ran into Probert and I didn't do very well. I didn't get hurt or anything, but I didn't do very well. But when you look back, just go look through the history of it. Like Mike Tyson, he gets when he gets beat, he wasn't the same man. He wasn't the same man. And then Chuck Liddell and these guys, when they fight, and all of a sudden their stuff. they aren't the same people. When you're fighting's all about confidence. If your confidence level is not at a high, it's hard to battle. You'll go on this little slide for a while until you got to be mentally strong at some point in time to come out of it.
This is such a not worthy example, but it's the same way in comedy. You can get rattled in comedy, and you're like, I got to shake that one up.
Oh yeah, I bombed in front of the Kingston. It was the Canadian Military Friends and Family Christmas party, and they're all booing me. I tell him to go fuck himself.
And your children.
Fuck you for defending our freedom. Driving home crying from Kingston 5 hours. Then I gotta go play a military show the next week.
Yeah. Get it together, Morrison.
Oh yeah.
I read this book with Jordan Peterson, and he actually said this is something that's hardwired in us. He studied lobsters, and if a lobster fought another lobster, and they were 5 times more likely to lose the next fight if they lost because their confidence was shook.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's built in us,
So if you're playing on the East Coast, it's double.
Yeah, exactly. But if you know what, if you look at all the things, you look at all the fighters and that, and when you talk to them, I know you guys have talked to a few of them, but the only one guy that probably, and I did it because when I fought Dave Brown back in my day in Quebec, I fought him twice in one game. In the first fight, I do really well. I cut him.
Yeah.
He goes down, and I got all this confidence. I got too cocky, and the second fight, he was really, I guess he got really mad because he come out and he was throwing from downtown, and it was just. But he come back. If you beat Brownie up, usually he'd come back even madder than hell the next time. So, but going back to what you're saying though, when I fought all the time, I fought on confidence, man. And if things were rolling good, I had no problem walking into it. But if you had a little hiccup, it took you a little bit of time to get back out of the gate again. So it was tough mentally on you.
Well, the Dave Brown fight, I was saying to John, because I kind of bring John up to speed on some of these guys that were.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like watching a good hockey fight? But Tyler has got his PhD in watching these fucking things.
So I was saying you're a bit of a legend killer. You drop Brown, or you cut Brown there, and you LaForge. All these guys, you took some big guys to school, but the Brown thing, him coming back in the same game, he was a nasty guy.
Yeah.
And I was reading about a couple guys just on the forum.
It's another day at work, I guess, right? I lost that one,
But Brown though, if you had time in between, if you beat him and then he had time to think about it, it was always worse. Like Stu Grimson, there was a few games in between, and he really did a number on Stu, in the rematch. Yeah. So they're like, oh, Kimble was actually. It was good that he got to fight him in the same game. Dave didn't have much time to think about it.
He didn't. His pitcher never made the dartboard.
But it's so true. I did it one time. I was down and my NHL career was over, and I was playing in Peoria, and I had a guy, and I didn't do very well in him, and I sort of screwed my knee up in a fight, and I had six weeks to think about this, and I went through the therapy, and that's all I thought about. And I come back, and I had a good fight with him, but I break his nose, and but it was just there was an anger that had to come out at some point, and I think that's how Brownie usually did it. There was an anger, and when that anger come out, he looked the hell out because it was coming.
Right.
Oh yeah, and he had those dead eyes like a shark, just cruising.
Yeah. He was one tough man.
And so the one thing, this is something very interesting that I noticed, because there's a guy that I'm friends with who posts regularly on hockeyfights.com, and he does these things where he does year by year, he picks the 10 best fights. He goes through and heavily scrutinizes the fights, and he puts a poll up for people to vote. Which one's the best fight of the year? But the 10 fight of the year candidates, you keep coming up every year that you played. Pretty much, you had the scrap. One of the top 10 scraps of the year. That's not easy to do.
Yeah.
So these fights were
during an era where there was probably 3 or 4 fights a night across the league.
Yeah, the toughest.
Yep. I remember watching the highlights then, and it would just be
it's so fun, man.
Yeah, it was the best.
Yeah.
But
you're right.
Some of the fights that come up, it was you versus Sherla, Shane Sherla. What was that fight like? That's just you going, knuckle down against this guy.
Well, that was in that's the year Minnesota. We played Minnesota in the playoffs, and that's the year Holly scores at 86. So we were playing, and I believe that was the second game of the playoffs, and made the series 1-1. But we were up 5-1, and Churla was a guy that, he was playing. He had run around, and he threw big body checks and everything, and that's what he'd been doing that game. So him and his line mate were running around on ice, so I had to step in, and it was in the heat of the moment. It was playoff hockey, which, you don't even really see much fighting going on. But
that was one of the best playoff fights ever.
It was a 5-1 hockey game. Yeah, and we were switching right to left. And, when you look at the fight, though, there's a bunch of those, a few of those are missing, but a few of them actually hit. And it's just, that's the way I fought, guys. I had to stand back, and I had to, you were going to stand there and take him, and I was going to take him, and eventually one of us is going down, and that's just the way I rolled.
And earlier you were talking about fighting lefties, because you're predominantly a righty. The one thing I was watching your fight against John Kordick, and I noticed the way you fought him. I was like, how important is it for you as a righty to get on the inside of a lefty, like get inside so he can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get you, because so many guys have trouble against southpaws. You have so much success against southpaws as a righty, maybe more than most dudes that I've seen fight.
There was when I was my second year at Quebec, I went to Kingston, Ontario with there was a guy on our team named Trevor Steinberg. And so we went down, and I lived in Kingston because he was a big physical trainer, or, he was into the fitness part. And so I went down there to get into shape. And so when I was going down there was a boxing club down there. And so we would go to the boxing club, and, we'd do our runs and our workouts and that, but we'd also do twice a week. We'd go to the boxing club. And there was a guy that was there. He was he wasn't a light heavyweight, but he was a light middleweight, I think. He was a champion of Canada at the time. And so, I got some time to spend with him, and to watch how power punches were thrown, and to where you set your feet up on the inside of a guy, get your foot inside, and turn the shoulder and all that stuff. So I learned, I knew how to fight, but this was just a thing of getting more power into your system and getting quicker punches off. And it was just amazing to watch like these boxers, the way they throw like a 150-pound guy throwing these punches, he was about a 230-pound guy. The power that he had behind it,
right?
It was and where you would set your feet up, and how you would get inside, and where you're positioning your head and all that. It was quite it helped me out quite a bit when I was going through the process.
And how old are you? How many years have you been playing in the league when you decide to sort of to do this and start learning, to take it up a notch?
Yeah, that was my second year pro, so I would have been 20 to 21 years old at the time.
Okay, gotcha. So you went in early.
Yeah, for sure. It was just a when I went to Kingston to go to get this training. I wasn't initially going to box, but the boxing guy was there, and I really liked it. I tell you, I even thought about how you could get into boxing and that, but obviously the hockey career was more important to me at the time.
Of course.
It was, I was really interested in it because, you go through back in the days when Tyson was rolling and, doing all this fighting, and boxing was huge at the time. And
huge.
Especially in the heavyweight division.
Oh yeah, that's what the NHL was like that with like Probert being the champ. He was like the Tyson of the era, and like you just have all these gunslingers coming along.
Yep.
It's the most entertaining time, I think, for hockey. It really evolved into that, and for you to be a young guy at that time, you got thrown right into the fire.
Yeah. How when you came into the league, how old were you, and how much? Because what were you, like 20 and like 200 pounds?
Yeah, I was. I got drafted that year, so I was a 19-year-old, and I think I just turned 20. I just turned 19 or 20. I think I just turned 20 when I got called up to my first NHL game.
And you're just going these guys who are grown men, and not that, like, of course, you're coming in here 6'2", 200 pounds. You're a grown man, but I mean you still got some growing to do. You're still by many measures you're still a kid.
Yeah, you are. But you know what? But that back in the day, though, when you're a young kid coming up, you're so full of piss and vinegar. You're ready to fight anybody, and it's just you're not going to say no to anybody. You're all in. It's not like when the score is 8-1. Oh, I got to go fight this guy because it's 8-1, and I'll be glad to go fight this guy. It was just
right.
You were making a name for yourself, and God, you're sitting there looking. I'm 20 years old. I'm playing in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
God, what else? What else do you want? If you can't fight for that, what the hell are you fighting for? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So you're in the league, and it's 1990-91 season, and you're you're cutting through these guys. You're having some really good fights. But now it's time to fight Bob Probert. What's going through your mind the day that you got to fight the king?
You know what? When I was going up to people, it was the day before, the day of it got tough because you're thinking through the process. It's not like no, I'm not going to fight him. I was I know I'm going to fight him. How am I going to get to that point? And how am I going to go through the process? It's almost. Sometimes when I'd fight certain people, getting ready to fight certain, there was a method to your madness. Where you're going to have to get to, and it's just, you thought about it. And I don't think I'm the only one in doing that, but I had an idea of what was going to happen. And the only thing that screwed me up in the first time I fight Bobby was when we were playing Detroit. Dennis Viel sort of comes into the picture, and I
fought him.
He was a young kid at the time, so I ended up fighting him first, and that sort of.
That gas is
sort of threw things for a haywire.
Well, it's interesting if you watch the Viel fight. Probert's on the ice, and you see him staring you down like he's a predator. It's really interesting. Like you don't see Bob Probert that serious that often.
Right.
Like it was like because you had just dropped Crowder. Before that, it's like he sees you as like a really big threat. So maybe he was like even stepping up a little bit harder when he did fight you that game. You know what I mean? Like Probert was out to send a fucking message to everyone in the league at that time. So running into Viel.
Well, you must have been the number one contender at that point.
Pretty much.
Well, at that time I was because I just had that fight with Crowder, and he was getting all this hype for with him in the Probert fight, which really wasn't as bad as people say it was.
He stepped on a stick there, and it was a cut.
Right. But it just starts making news, and people don't even see the fight, and they're like, "Wait, what?" And then the legend starts to grow.
And he took it very seriously. Obviously, he wanted the crown, but it was. But running into people underestimate how tough Dennis Viel was. So to go against Viel, he was nails, man. He was a tough fighter.
Yep.
So just to be able to go those two guys in one game takes some steel, man.
Well, when I fought Viel, and so when you're fighting Viel, and it was there was punches thrown, but there was a lot of wrestling going on. Probably the fight lasts for like 45 seconds, so you're in wrestling.
Yep.
You go in the penalty box, you're sucking air, you're doing everything, and then when I come back out in the ice, I didn't even get to go to the bench. I got put out right out in the ice right away, and I look and. Who's on the other side of the ice? It's Probie sitting there. So I'm going off saying, this is a son of a bitch. And so the play come down.
Isn't that how I had this drawn up?
That wasn't the way I pictured it. I promise you it wasn't. But he was. I was down on the boards, and he come down to hit me, and I seen him coming, and we did, and it's probably a stupid moment for me because I should have waited a while, but we fought, and so I fought him, and I threw a couple punches, and then he strung me out, and I didn't have the energy. I just didn't have it to get to him. I couldn't get to him. His arms were too long, and I was strung out, and I didn't have
a period and a Gatorade in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. I needed something, but I needed something.
And back to the theme of taking on some giants and doing pretty good with the pop in your punch. Stu Grimson, when you were with St. Louis, you gave him a nice little go around there. How was that going against Stewie?
Well, you know what? We went and played in. So I was with St. Louis. We go into Chicago, and that's the best rink you'll ever play hockey in. It might be the best sporting event, I'm sure.
The Madhouse on Madison.
The crowd is just crazy.
Yeah.
It was just crazy.
With the old organ.
Funny, and there's a story about this though, because when I was a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old kid, I was in Swift Current playing AAA for the Swift Current Legionnaires. I actually might have been playing for Patty Janelle actually.
Indians, legendary tough coach. He liked to ice a tough squad.
But him and so his son Aaron Janelle, me, Sean Van Allen, who played in the National Hockey League for a while, and another guy. We went up to Medicine Hat from Swift Current, which was probably about a 2-hour drive. So we drive up there, and Regina Pats were playing Medicine Hat Tigers, and so I'd never seen a Western Hockey League game before. And so Stu Grimson, who was playing for the Regina Pats at the time, and I really, guys, to be honest with you, and I was 15, 16 years old. I didn't even know about this fighting stuff yet. I hadn't even got into it yet.
Right.
And we were standing down by the boards, the four of us. And so when you stand down by the glass, to get to the ice level, probably had to go down another 2 feet. And I'm standing there on the glass, and Stu Grimson is at least eye level with me. So I'm looking, I was sort of in amazement. I go, holy fuck, look at the size of this man.
Tall guy.
And
the Grim Reaper.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is in junior, and I'm looking how big this guy is. And it just goes, when you go full, so you're the whole ride home from Swift Current, there was a snowstorm going on. The whole ride in the car, the four of us are talking about how big Stu Grimson was. And so now you're in Chicago Stadium, and you're playing for the Blues, and you're coming out, and there's Stu Grimson sitting across from the side from you. So I went into the fight though, and everything went according to where I wanted to go, because I got a hold of him, and I let him throw a few punches, and then I just come through with it. And and when you're fighting, whoever gets the punch in, whoever gets the first punch in, or at some point whoever lands the most important punch, that usually starts to dominate the fight at some point in time. So it's, and things went my way, because you obviously seen Stu fight a lot of times. He's a pretty tough man.
Of course,
absolutely.
Of course.
It's so interesting that you saw him when you were like a kid, and then you run into him that many years later. So it's like, and he's evolved, but you've evolved too. So it's not,
oh boy.
Did you call the guys you were with and be like, guess what just happened?
No, I didn't. No, Sean Van Allen, I ran into him later on, but he was playing. He played quite a while in the National Hockey League.
Played with Edmonton, right?
It was just. What's that?
Did he play with Edmonton?
Did he play the Ducks? I think he played the Ducks.
He did. Yeah, he played with Edmonton, and he ran around for a bit. But Sean Van Allen, he becomes. I bet he plays 400 or 500 games. I don't know if you can quote me on it. He might even play more than that. He plays quite a while.
Mm-hmm. I remember when he was with the Cape Breton Oilers.
Yeah, that's where he started out, because when he was in Cape Breton, I was in Halifax playing for the Citadels, and so that's where we crossed paths for the first time. Not first. I played with him in there, but I mean when we went pro, that's the first time I ran into. We used to call him Wally, but that's what I ran into him at. Yeah.
And when you're with the Halifax Citadels, you run into a couple brothers that they don't really get as much hype for as tough as they were. The Roberts brothers.
Yep. They were tough.
What was that like having to go against brothers?
We were, before I got called up, we were playing. I think it's Sherbrooke, because they had been in Fredericton before, and I think you always hear about Freddie Beach, and the guys, when the old veterans when I was there, was always Freddie Beach, but I believe they went to Sherbrooke this year. They'd moved there for their minor league team. The Montreal Canadiens did.
Yes, they were in Sherbrooke. Yeah. Yeah.
And we went in there the first time I eventually played against the two of them, but I fight Serge. I have it's on the YouTube thing too. I have a great fight with Serge. I cut him. It's a long fight, back and forth.
Yeah. Oh my
swinging.
God, that was so great.
And then, so probably we go to the box a little bit later on. Then Mario, he decides to come out, so I'm fighting Mario, and then go through that fight and. And then at the end of the game, Serge was mad, I guess, as Mario got to me. So then I fought Serge twice and Mario the very first time I played him.
Their mother's probably up in the stand just hating you.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the sister and the dad and everything to come out of the stands. I'm waiting for the whole clan to come. Basically.
Mario, you get out there and fight that boy.
But you know what? They don't. They go through. Well, Mario ends up winning the Stanley Cup with the Canadiens when they win it. But there's some names down in the minors of guys. A guy named Jacques Mayot stayed in the minors a long time, and these guys were tough guys. They paid their dues down in the minors, boy. They were
you
tough
fought
guys.
him too. You fought him too when he was with the Montreal club in that league, right?
Who's that?
Jacques.
Who's that?
Jacques Mayot.
No, I fought Jacques. Where was Jacques at? Because I took him. I went to Halifax, and they'd got rid of Jacques, and he went somewhere else. He might have been went to Winnipeg or Moncton or something. I ended up fighting him there.
Moncton
one time
is
in the
where
minors.
you fought him. Moncton in the AHL. It was shortly after that fight with the Roberts brothers, actually.
Yeah, correct. You're correct. Yep.
Good thing I'm here,
So.
Jesus Christ. You fucking,
That's what I'm here for,
isn't it
Darin.
interesting to talk to your stalker?
Actually, I got dropyourgloves.com pulled up right now with the fight card.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's awesome.
But one of the fights that I loved, I was telling Johnny this earlier, one of my favorite things was your fight against Claude Lemieux. You guys are having a line brawl against the Montreal Canadiens. You're with the Quebec Nordiques.
Right.
And all hell's breaking loose.
That fucking beautiful rivalry.
You got, what a rivalry it was. And you guys are kind of isolated from the pack. And anyone who's listening can check this out on YouTube. It's so great. But what were you saying to Claude Lemieux?
I was calling him a chicken shit and every other name in the book, but I was trying to get him to fight because Claude was, at that time, there was probably Ulf Samuelsson and Claude Lemieux were probably the two most hated guys from other teams. Because they were always, they antagonized everybody and they got in your face and they never shut up. And
they're just
we're
boys.
on hockey night in Canada, and this thing sort of comes to my and I'm sitting there and there's a truth. So we go through the fight process and we get into the fight and. One of the things I've always done, and every time I fight, I usually come out of it and I'm always smiling or something. I enjoyed it at one point in time, so I always had a smile on. But it was kind of funny. So when this fight happens, later that night after the game, we go out to eat. I'm coming home from the hotel, and I think I'm with Ken McRae. He was with us at the time, and me and Kenny go get in the elevator, and who's sitting in the elevator was Don Cherry, and. When you're a guy that knows hockey and like fighting, obviously Don Cherry was a person that you always watched. You wanted to be on his videos.
Of course,
he's a man. Rock him, sock him.
Of course,
yeah, exactly. And he was, he's a god in Canada, and so he's sitting there, and to have him put his hand out and shake your hand, and he goes, "That a boy, kid. I like what you did tonight." And I just, it's just something like that is something that you take with you the rest of your life.
That's so cool.
So
that's so cool.
And the way that you handled that too is so funny. About when you're on the ice, like the way you put your gloves down on the ice so casually, like this,
giving him every opportunity.
Oh yeah. Oh god, that was so funny.
So you just say, one point in time you liked it. You're walking away with these things from a smile on your face. You played another 7 years, in
about 7.5 years on and off. Yep.
But outside of the NHL afterwards, you're not making big bucks out there. You're just, you're playing. At some point, you got to realize, okay, so I'm not going back. You're just out there banging, and you're banging because you like to do it.
Yep. But I was the good thing though when I went down to the minors after I'd done NHL, I actually went. I played for Robbie Fatorik, and we had a really good team. And then that was my last year of playing in the AHL. And then I go down and I played in the IHL with San Antonio, Kansas City, and you're fighting a lot of guys that are coming up through the ranks, and you're still hanging on. There's still a little bit of hope in your system that you might get the thing back.
Right? Yeah.
Realistically, what you're saying is true. I wasn't going back, but I'm still trying to, in my own mind, to keep me going. I'm still hoping maybe you go back and.
In that league, are you playing? Sorry.
Because I actually the reason why it goes on when I go to Kansas City, I'd got a tryout with the Phoenix Coyotes at one point in time when I was all over, and it was my last professional tryout in an NHL team, and I got to fight Bob Probert again for the second time. I went in Chicago and I fought Proby, and. So I did, and I did pretty good with Probert. I lose the battle, but at least I get to hit him a few times this time, so that was good.
That was a toe-to-toe war. Great fight, great acquittal of yourself in that. Yeah.
So I get to come back to battle him, and so when you do that, you know that you still have it, and so then you go down to the minors, and you're still battling because that's the way your life was. You grew up doing that, and you still hope there's a hope there, but obviously it never came. And then when I went farther down, probably 2 or 3 years after that, I was actually playing down for a team in Missouri here called the River Otters, and I ended up scoring like 29 goals. So I was getting to play hockey again.
That was my next question. It's like, so are you're sort of free from that role of just going out and banging guys, and now you're finding the back of the net.
Yep.
Were you riding the stick, Darin?
No, I'll tell you, the cutest moments that when I played in Prince Albert, if you look at my numbers, I had 35 goals, 36 assists, 300 and some penalty minutes. So I knew how to play the game.
Oh yeah.
My thing my problem was I wasn't a very good skater. So I wasn't when you get to the National Hockey League and you play this role, you get put in a role and you're basically staying there. You know, look at all the fighters when my time went on.
Yep.
Like besides Bob Probert and Marty McSorley got to play a lot, but other than that, there was guys like me, Grimmer, Twister, and all these guys. You know, you were going to get your 3-4 shifts, your 5 shifts, and that's what you were going to get, and that's all you were getting.
Right.
And that's the way the game was made up of at the time. So I finally got a chance to come back and play, and it was actually my last year when we were going through the process, and I was going to retire at the end of the year. And in one game, I'd scored 4 goals. One of them was in a shootout, actually. So it was the 4th goal.
Oh, fun!
And my daughter had just been born, so I got to. It meant nothing to nobody except for our family. But my daughter was there, and she was just a little baby, and I got to take her, and I got first star in the game, and I got to skate around with her out in the ice. So, but that meant the world to me when I got to do that.
Oh yeah, that's sweet. So cool. That's sweet. How much of your
you guys didn't want to hear the sweet story, did you?
No, we do.
We like that.
Yeah,
too.
I like that
but
stuff.
So now that you say that, what's the best street fight you've ever been in?
I've had a lot. I've had a lot of them. Back in my younger
we'd love
days.
to hear those.
In Prince Albert, there's a lot of them. I do pretty good. There's a couple I probably get a little too much whiskey in the system, and I don't quite come out on the good end of it. But there were some ones back in the day. That's probably one of my downfalls. I used to fight all the time, and I wasn't getting paid for that one, which was silly, but I would do it.
Right.
So you're scrapping off ice while you're in Prince Albert, playing for the Raiders at the time. Then is that
playing for the Raiders? I was playing for the Blues. I was fighting in the off season too. So I was just doing it. That's just the way.
No way.
The guys I hung out with, my buddies and my friends were, that's the way we rolled. We'd go out and we'd have a good time. And
so tell us.
Too many Jack Daniels and
Jack Daniels has been the downfall of many great men.
So tell us about a banger. What's your number one street fight that you got in?
My number one, I don't know. I probably my number one.
Also, we don't want you to incriminate yourself.
Yeah. Well, I get a jaw broken one time because I was too drunk. I fell down and a guy just basically hit me and. Yeah. But that wasn't my number one. We'll go back to where I was in Kingston. I'm in Kingston, Ontario, and so I've gone through this training. We're going Canada Days coming up, and I played with Jeff Brown in Quebec and in Quebec. I played with Brownie. I actually lived with him for a little bit. So Brownie asked me and Trevor Steinberg to come up to Ottawa. Well, Steiny doesn't go. I go, and we're up there hanging out, and Jeff Brown's got a friend who's a cop, and so we're out there and we're drinking, and I get into this bar and. I watched. There's about 6 or 7 guys. They look like they're big, stocky football guys or whatever, and they were picking on this one guy. And I'm sitting there, and again, I'm into the whiskey. And I said to the guy, why don't you fucking leave him alone? And then that started, and we wanted to go outside. So before you know it, I'm sitting outside, and it's sort of like a square in Ottawa, and I couldn't tell you where it is, but. Me and this guy square off, and by the time the fight's over, it goes on for like 5 minutes, I bet you. By the time this fight gets over, we got a crowd of probably 2,000 people around us watching this fight.
Canada!
Yeah, on Canada Day. And then the funny part of the whole story is when I gets done, when the fight's all over, me and the Brownie's friend who was a cop, we go back to Jeff's house because we didn't know where anyone was, and we just got the hell out of there, so we weren't going to go to jail or anything. So we go back, and Brownie comes back, and Jeff Brown's sitting there, and he'd been sitting up in the bar with Stevie Eiserman at the point. So Jeff Brown goes, as Jeff Brown's sitting there telling the story, he says, you guys missed it all. You wouldn't believe it. He says, we're sitting up here on the balcony. You should have seen this fight that went on down below. I go, Brownie, you stupid ass. That was me. Well, it was quite a heyday, though. It was pretty great.
Oh yeah,
great story. And you know whoever fought you that night, that's their claim to fame. You know.
It was the funny thing about the fight when I was with the guy, because I'd gone through this boxing training.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready. We're squaring off with the guy, and I'd been probably the week earlier, the couple weeks leading up to it, I'd been working on my left jab. So I'm sitting there and I throw this left jab out and poke him right in the beak. And I sat there and I guess I thought the fight was over after I made this thing because I thought it was so awesome. All of a sudden I'm getting corked with about 3 right hands here. And I said, holy shit, we're into a fight here now.
It's on.
We got a good one.
Yeah.
It was funny.
Oh, so funny. So funny. Okay. How much of your power and your strength do you think came from your hockey hair?
My hockey hair?
From your sweet mullet.
But that's how they all wore it, though. That's how
No, it was great. It was great. He had a great one.
I was after the Claude Lemieux fight, I didn't know if you were smiling because you won the fight or because you just had the best hair in the league.
Yeah, back in the day, we used to have the short on the side, and you'd put the barber would go in there, and everyone on the team would go in and get those little lines drawn in the side of their head, like crazy stuff.
Business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah, old Joe Dirt. We could have all been Joe Dirt at one
time. Oh man.
Oh man. Well, listen, we thank you so much for doing the show. It's been a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so awesome to have you on, and just a blast, and we'll love to have you on again and down the road. But thank you so much, Darin. That was great.
Yeah,
always
really great.
Yeah, anytime, guys. I'll keep following you on Twitter and see your stuff. And if you ever get down this way, I won't be there booing you in the front. If anyone boos you, I'll have my last fight. Okay, so you come down this way.
We're starting to do some live shows with this, so it'd be awesome. Maybe
to have you work at security.
Yeah. Even when we come down, we're doing a live one in New York with Colton Orr on January 25th.
Poughkeepsie, whatever.
Poughkeepsie. However you
Laugh Out Loud Comedy Club is what we're doing.
Yeah, so maybe someday down the road we can come into St.Louis and get you and maybe Jansen and those cats on and do a live one down there.
Yeah, Twister's living down here also.
Oh
boy,
Tony's listening for sure.
There's a full. We had him on our podcast. Me and Rivs do. We popped him on our podcast, and Twister's he's pretty popular man in town here, and you don't see him around much anymore.
Oh,
but he's when he shows up, it's worth the time just to sit down and listen to that man. He can tell a story. He can.
Oh wow,
absolutely.
That's
we'd
great.
love to come down and see you in St. Louis, man. So
that'd be great.
Thanks so much for doing
Stakes on us.
And
yeah, you bet, you guys.
All the best, eh?
Awesome.
Thank you kindly.
Well, there it is. There's another episode of Fight Stories. Fucking, well, that was such a good time, man. Such a good time. He was so generous with his with his stories, and that fucking street fight was a good one. That was a good one. I'm glad you asked.
You know he's got a few more.
Oh yeah,
so this is just part one.
Yeah. So that was great. Listen. Subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Shoot us a rating and a comment. All that stuff helps. And if you really want to support, then throw us a couple of bucks at Patreon. We'll be pumping out all kinds of shit. We're giving away all kinds of goodies when you do that stuff. Both of our albums, shirts, and tickets to live shows with Colton Orr and Kimble. And we want to do some more live shows with wrestlers. We want to get this thing to the point where we're doing live shows with you guys. Guys with great fight stories.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The more we get, the more
people are just coming out to because they know it's going to be a banger.
Yeah, and also, guys, please send us your fight stories. We're getting a fight story a day right now. As far as somebody like reaching out and being like, "Oh, I got a great story." We want to hear them all. We would love for you guys to record them, like on just shoot us a quick video with a funny fight story, throw it on the page, or hit us up, privately. We want to hear them all, guys. We really appreciate all the feedback and the love that the podcast has been getting, and we want to return it.
Yeah, we're searching high and low for all the lowest lives.
Yeah, all right, baby. That's it. Again, thanks to the guys here at Shared Universe for having us. I know we'll be doing this again because Tyler's going to be shooting up here, and sometimes we gotta get a Skyper.
Oh yeah, so follow us on all of our social media too. Don't be pricks.
Yeah, and download our albums. We're the fucking best.
Fucking right.
The white boys are back. All right, that's it.